All right. So how's everyone doing today?
Alright,
Well,
hanging in there.
Everyone good? Perfect. Well, tonight we're going to show you guys 5 tactics on how to investigate your audience properly. So when you guys are giving your presentations, you want to watch your audience members, right? You don't want to just present information without looking at what your audience members are doing. So like Professor said, right? You don't want to have your laptops down. We're watching out for that. You know, if you're on your phones, if you're on your laptops, if you're having side conversations, you want to observe all of that, and we're going to teach you how to do that in a proper way. We're looking for Professor K. He's wanted for not knowing how to analyze his audience because everyone is always on their phones and always on their computers. So we're looking for him because he does not know how to properly read his audience. So we're going to teach you how not to break the law. My name is Zain Ahmed. I'm going to be teaching you guys how to research your audience.
I'm Simran Bains, and I will be doing how to read your audience.
I'm Melvin. I'm going to talk about our tone of voice and verbiage.
I'm Jose. I'll be teaching you how to persuade the audience.
And I'm Dan Barker, and I'll teach about egocentrism.
So, going through the agenda for tonight, all 5 tactics will be presented by all 5 of us, of course. We're going to jump right into the content, and at the end we're going to give you a brief summary and conclusion after everything is done. That way we can make sure that you guys understand and you can use in your presentations how to present your audience and how to visualize and understand what your audience is doing and reading them. So, jumping right into it, of course, researching your audience. The best way to start off with researching your audience is surveys. So, show of hands, how many of you conducted and did the survey that we sent out as a group? Okay, so a handful of you. So, a survey is a very good way, pre-presentation, on how you can understand and research your audience. You always want to know who you're presenting to. That way you can understand and tailor your audience members and your presentation to how the audience reacts to it. So questionnaires, whether they be quantitative or qualitative, you can understand how that data can help you throughout your presentation. So even if it be just qualitative data that you can use for yourself, quantitative data that you can present to your audience, or just questionnaires that you can use to understand and tailor your information that you're presenting to them, that way you can create a better presentation. Location is also a big one. Your demographic, your age group, your education, all of that plays into a factor in researching your audience. If you're presenting in a classroom setting, if you're presenting in a big city, a rural city, and in the country, all that stuff plays into you understanding and researching your audience so that you understand who you're presenting to. Audience types, you have the familiar audience, you have a knowledgeable audience, and you have your unknown audience. Show of hands, how many of you have read chapter 1 out of the Guide to Presentations book? Honestly read it, like fully through. Okay, so a handful of you. Okay, so I can probably assume that a lot of the audience in here is an unknown audience. So the presentation and the information that I'm giving you, you're probably not going to understand, and that's our job to make sure you understand and tailor our presentation to help you guide yourself through your presentation so you know what you're looking at throughout your whole audience. Your culture, you want to look at different backgrounds, who's coming to your presentation. Again, they can be done through surveys, whether it be cultural surveys, whether it be ethical surveys, all those types of things, quantitative and qualitative, will play back into your culture. You don't want to create a presentation for somebody who's out in the country, but you don't want to make a presentation for somebody that's in the city, right? If you make a presentation guided for a different culture, not many people are going to understand what you're talking about, and a lot of what you're going to be doing is going to be unknown to the audience members. Moving on, what you want to do is disregard stereotypes, and by that means, show of hands, somebody pick from the audience, what's a stereotype that everyone knows about?
Chinese are smart at math.
What is it?
Chinese people are smart at math.
Chinese people are smart at math. That's a great example because Chinese people are not all smart at math. So what you don't want to do is stereotype your audience. In doing so, you're stereotyping your audience. You're going to create opinions for yourself that don't have to do anything with your presentation. All those things where students don't really care about presentations or the information that you're presenting. If people are always on their phones, if people are always on their laptops, that's a stereotype because you can see around the room, nobody's on their phones, nobody's on their laptops. You want to tailor yourself to understand and expect what your audience is going to react to your presentation. You also want to move on to understanding the personal opinions, emotions, and inconsistency. You don't want to do those things. If you provide opinions from yourself, you're creating a bias. And in doing so, your audience is not going to make you as very credible. Because you want your audience to be credible, they're going to listen to you more. They're going to take away that knowledge. They're going to take away those facts that you're presenting to them. And in doing so, you're not going to create any emotion. And if you put emotion behind it, it's good to have a passion for what you're presenting, right? It's amazing to have a passion for what you're presenting. But that emotion behind it is going to decrease the credibility that you're providing because emotions also play into, back to opinions. And that creates inconsistency. Throughout your presentation, if you don't know what you're talking about, you don't know your facts, you haven't done your research, you're not going to understand what you're presenting, and you're going to be inconsistent throughout the presentation. You're just going to have a lot of pauses. You're not going to know what your team members are presenting. All those things play into an inconsistent presentation, and nobody wants to listen to anything like that. Moving on, some of the misconceptions about presentations and researching your audience as a whole. Using slang, staring at people, using your voice. All those things are misconceptions as well. You don't want to use slang throughout your presentation. Again, it goes back to using surveys. If you don't know who you're presenting to, how can you know what slang you're using? If I'm using the word y'all in somewhere like Switzerland, nobody's going to know what that means. So you want to understand where you're presenting, and that goes back to the location of it. You don't want to stare at one person throughout your whole presentation. If I'm staring at this gentleman right here, people are just going to think I'm talking to him and not the audience as a whole, right? So if you're doing that, you're not going to project your voice. You're not going to understand. Nobody's going to listen to you because you're not looking at everyone around the room. Going back to practice and perfection. The saying practice makes perfect is not true at all. Practice does not make perfect. Nobody in this world can be perfect. Throughout your presentations, you're gonna make mistakes. You're gonna pause. You're gonna have those ums and ahs, and that's okay. Practice can get you very close to perfect, but you're never gonna be perfect, and it's okay to make those mistakes. You just have to move on and continue out through your presentation because the audience members are watching you. You make those mistakes and you dwell on them, audience members are like, okay, he's not prepared for this presentation, or she's not prepared for this presentation. Know your information, practice your information, but don't expect perfection, because you're never gonna be perfect. Having those notes, clipboards, iPads, iPhones, whatever you have, all those notes help you understand what you're presenting, but don't just be staring at your notes. In doing so, the audience is going to realize you don't really care about what's being presented to you. You're just going to be dwelling on your notes, you're just going to be looking at them. You're not focused on the actual audience and the information you're presenting at hand. Moving on. These are some of the statistics that you'll see from taking the survey. You can see the kind of questions we ask. Count of what field do you work in? Count of have you spoken in public before? Are you a manager or are you not a manager? These are some simple questions that we can use to tailor the audience and tailor our presentation to you guys. So you can see 75% of the class has never been a manager. 25% have. So if I'm speaking on a management presentation, I want to show the basics of management because a lot of you won't understand what the basics of management is. So you can use surveys, quantitative and qualitative, to understand and tailor your presentations to what you want to present and the audience type you want to present. In doing so, I'm going to pass it on to Simran, and she's going to show you guys how to properly read your audience after you've researched them.
As Zane said, I will be talking about how you would read your audience. The first recommendation is investigating. To ensure that your audience is paying attention, you kind of want to take a scan of the room and see if they're looking up, giving you eye contact, if they're sitting up straight, thank you for sitting up straight, and all of you actually. And that way you know if they're paying attention, if they understand what you're talking about, if they're confused or not, and as well as head movements and facial expressions kind of give away whether they understand what you're presenting. To be aware of what the audience is doing, the speaker needs to check if the audience members are checking their phones, just as Zane said, or checking their laptops, or having even side conversations, because that includes distractions. Moving on to recommendation 2, intelligence. Chapter 1, our book guided presentation says that having credibility is one way to attract your audience, or attract audience attention. Having a job role or expertise that matches the topic that you're talking about or presenting about speaks volume to your credibility. It's not necessary to have previous knowledge, however, it is good to research and know what you will be presenting about. For example, if this presentation was about criminal law, I wouldn't be the best person to give you information on it. A police officer would probably be the best person to give you information on it. Adding a relevant story to your presentation and will also kind of bolster your credibility according to chapter 1. And you also need to know if your audience has previous knowledge about it, just as Zane took the survey and you guys answered, so we kind of got an idea of management positions, if you have been in it or not. And then also investigating to see whether the audience has pre-existing positive, neutral, or negative feelings towards the topic that you're presenting about. Disregard is our recommendation number 3. If a presenter or a speaker comes unprepared, it's one of the biggest mistakes that you could do. It'll probably cause you to pause and think in the middle of the presentation, and you probably don't want to take those pauses because you want to be explaining all the information. Using jargons will create an obstacle between you and the audience. For example, if I were to say an acronym such as OCA, a lot of you wouldn't know what OCA is. However, OCA does mean the Office of Court Administration, but it wouldn't benefit me or the audience to know that terminology because it doesn't apply to the rating your audience, essentially. And also, don't give personal opinions. You want to have facts, you want to have data that relates right back to your topic. Do not use lengthy stories. You don't want to have a story that has no relevance or confuses the audience. And for example, if I were to share a story about how to deliver a speech instead of how to read your audience or analyze your audience, it wouldn't make sense with what I was presenting. And moving on to the fourth recommendation, misconception. It's a large misconception that there's no need for a plan B. However, you do want to have a plan B set in place in case something goes wrong and maybe one of your group members doesn't show up. You want to kind of know their part, you want to know your part as well, obviously, and you don't want to wing it. You want to practice your presentation before you present it. That once again goes back to credibility. You want to sound credible, you want to sound like you know what you're talking about. And always have a second option in mind in case something goes wrong, for sure. And then another common misconception is that not all presentations need to be professionally given. Although you don't have to wear professional clothing, as Dr. K, Professor K told us, it's important that you present your topic in a professional manner. You shouldn't stand up here and just make jokes. You need to have content, and it needs to be professional. Apologizing in the middle of your presentation, once again, goes back to credibility. If you say sorry, like Professor K said, then the audience members might think that you don't know exactly what you're talking about. And once again, as Zane had said earlier, practice makes perfect. Sounds good to hear, however, a lot of us will make mistakes, and it's a presentation and you're bound to have some type of issue come up with it. We'll be moving on to our video now.
Not just fighting a murder charge, we're fighting the police. They use politics and the media to fuel public outrage and turn Ryan, a boy who spent his entire life witnessing his mother's abuse, into a sociopath who hated his father. So, how do we win this? Not based on evidence, but the emotions of the jury. In emotionally driven cases, jury selection isn't a science. It's the art of human study. So how do we ensure the least amount of bias when picking a juror? Ms. Prep.
By making sure the bias swings in your favor. For example, men tend to be punishment-oriented and favor the prosecution.
What have you heard in the media about my client?
The short version? That he's a sociopathic cop killer.
I'd like to challenge Juror 505 for cause.
Juror dismissed.
Beyond gender, what else do we look for during voir dire? Mr. Gibbons.
Similarities between the juror and your client. Any personal connections that will help the juror sympathize.
Are you married?
Divorced.
Happily?
Happily divorced? Oh Lord, yes.
The defense accepts this juror? When police testimony is pivotal to the prosecution's case, we have to look for jurors who are prone to distrust authority. What are some of the signifiers of this? Mr. Walsh.
Number one is race. There's a larger distrust of police among Black Americans.
Don't call the police in my neighborhood.
Excuse. Every juror you let in that box can decide your client's fate.
Some cops are bad, some are good. Like all people.
Except that episode of NYPD Blue where Detective Simone died still makes me tear up. Excuse.
Grace Kelly and I have tea together. Quite often. Dismissed for cause.
Accept, Your Honor. Excuse.
Accept.
Accept.
Excuse, Your Honor.
Accept, Your Honor.
Accept, Your Honor.
Excuse, Your Honor.
Excuse.
12 complete strangers will make or break your case before you've said one word of your opening statement.
I direct you not to discuss the case with anyone, form an opinion, or search out any media coverage of this matter. Report back at 9 a.m. tomorrow.
Not just fighting a murder charge, we're fighting the police. They use
As you can see in the video, the lawyer reads the audience by investigating their body language, checking their previous intelligence or previous knowledge by using juror bias, like they mentioned in there, and then disregarding the irrelevant stories like the lady was talking about one of the shows that she watched. And she focuses on the juror rather than herself to pick the jury. And that goes back to how to read your audience. And now I'll be passing it on to Melvin to talk about tone of voice and verbiage.
Thank you, Simran. So after you research your audience and you read your audience, our recommendation 3 is to be aware of the tone of voice and verbiage that you will use when you give a presentation with an audience with different expertise levels. Investigate your audience expertise level. If your audience consists of beginners or inexperienced individuals, use simple verbiage to present your points. Simple verbiage simply means to use simple words in your sentences that everyone will understand. There's no need to use Shakespeare-like wording to get your point across. Now, if your audience members are well known to you, such as work colleagues, you can use common verbiage when communicating to your audience. Perhaps your company uses acronyms that is well known throughout the company, and in that case, it's perfectly fine to use acronyms. And if your audience are well-educated subject matter experts, then using an elevated verbiage works best when presenting to your audience. As a presenter to expert individuals, you want to make them believe that you are competent of what you're presenting to them. And using smart, well-organized phrases and words will give you more credibility. It is also important to investigate what level of tone you will use when you're presenting. For an audience made up of beginners and inexperienced individuals, a passive or calm tone works best. Remember, this type of audiences are beginners and they might be nervous or overwhelmed because of their inexperience, and a calm tone can make people feel secure and create and decrease the fear that they have. If you're presenting to a known audience such as work colleagues or teammates, a neutral tone will be best to use. If you're presenting to your direct reports at work and your presentation is about something that needs to be done in your company and needs to be implemented immediately, then using a firm tone is your best option. A firm tone conveys power and seriousness. Next, including your audience in your dialogue is really important. Be intelligent with how you connect to your audience. A good method to connect with an audience is by being personal. By using I in your presentation, you will be able to establish yourself as a responsible individual and can use that to project authority. For example, if you tell your direct reports, I will make sure that you have what you need in order to do your job. That gives them a sense that you are with them and that they can trust you. Using the word you, second one there, helps to pass some of that responsibilities to others. Remember, giving others tasks or responsibility is not a bad thing. In fact, there are certain individuals that you need to give them a task to do, and you might know a few of those people. Help these individuals by giving them responsibilities and guidance. The presenter can also use the word we to do a request or whenever they're presenting, which will definitely make the presenter seem personal. By using we, you make yourself part of the audience and make everyone feel as a group. Telling your direct reports we will work together to achieve our monthly sales goals will make them feel that you are part of the group and are dedicated in their success. Next, we have projected voice. Projected voice is also important for any presentation. Be intelligent with the volume that you use. You do not want to have a soft voice where people can barely hear you. And you don't want to be too loud where the person in the back is afraid of you. So be smart with the volume of voice that you use. Next, enunciate your words. That's really important. By simply saying your words correctly and enunciating, you will project a greater level of expertise and credibility. For example, say walking, not walking, or jogging, not jogging, and thinking, not thinking. If you do not pronounce the G, you are known as a G dropper, and nobody wants to be a G dropper, okay? Next, be aware of physical barriers during your presentation. This clipboard that I have here, if I place it in front of me, becomes a physical barrier. Some members will not be able to hear me when I talk. So please be aware, if you have something in your hand, don't put it in front of your face when you're doing a presentation. Next, we have disregard specialized languages. Examples of specialized languages are jargons, idioms, and cliches. Your audience might include individuals that are foreign, and if you use these specialized languages, you will confuse them. Example of a jargon is any language specific to a field, such as attorneys or doctors. If an attorney tells you the case has received a res judicata by the court, I know the majority here does not know what that means. And to a few of us that are Spanish speakers, res means beef. So you can imagine the confusion that can cause by using jargon that most individuals do not know. So, and what res judicata means is that the court has already decided on an issue. Example of an idiom is raining cats and dogs. And an example of cliche is beauty is only skin deep. So please stay away from jargons, from idioms, and cliches. Now, avoid speeding. If you speed through a presentation, you run the risk of confusing your audience. You also run the risk of missing your time limit, which we have for our presentation today, and omitting important points by accident. A presentation that has a normal flow and paced agenda has a greater chance of being accepted by your audience. There are also many misconceptions when it comes to doing a presentation, and as a presenter, you have to be aware of these misconceptions. One of the misconceptions is that silence during a presentation is bad, and that is false. It is actually better to stop and take a few seconds to think of your next sentence than to continue talking gibberish to your audience. Stopping for a few seconds can actually help you refocus and can get you back on track with your presentation. Staying silent for a few seconds can also convey confidence. If you stay quiet for a few seconds, your audience will start to pay attention to what your next sentence or your next action is going to be. I'm not sure if you guys have ever been at a presentation and someone stays quiet. You'll see the audience start moving closer, trying to find out what the person's going to say or why he's not talking anymore. So that a lot of people do that. They stay quiet for a reason. Lastly, staying silent for a few seconds is better than saying or in every sentence when you have lost what you will say next. It's better to stay silent for a few seconds than making your audience feel that you don't know what you're talking about by using or in every sentence. One last misconception that many have is that a topic is boring and that there's nothing you can do to make that topic interesting. In other words, a boring topic will always stay boring. That is also incorrect. As I have discussed, the presenter can add and has the power to make the boring topic interesting by just being aware of the voice and the verbiage and the tone that they'll use to present the presentation. Now, in front of you, we have placed one sheet. We're gonna do a quick activity. Go ahead and turn around the sheet that we presented, just a one page, and just take about a minute to read it, and then we'll give you your next step.
Feel free to put the paper down when you're done reading.
All right, so time's up. So can I have a volunteer from this side? What did you read? How can you explain what the verbiage and what the tone is and what you read?
In this case, this would be Othello, correct, that we're talking about? He's conflicted because he has to kill a person because she's in a position of power that allows her to kill, let's say, another person. She's beautiful as well, so he doesn't want to kill her because of that too.
Okay, was it easy or hard for you to understand what you just read?
Easy.
It was easy for you to understand?
Does anybody else have a different opinion on that? So it was hard for
Okay,
you.
so it was hard for you guys to understand what you read, okay.
It was hard the first like maybe 4 lines, and then after that it was like, oh, okay, fine.
Okay, yeah. And on this side, 1%, was it easy or hard to understand what you read?
It was hard for me. I just had to figure out what the agents were feeling to keep it out.
Okay. Anyone else?
I had no idea what I was doing.
Okay. So now we see why the verbiage is really important. You know, there's simple ways. In this case, we gave everyone the Shakespeare. You guys have the same thing, but the new modern version, they have the old version Shakespeare play. And
She cheated or she murdered?
We were supposed to help.
Exactly. So read the play. There's simple ways to give out, you know, a presentation or a story. You don't have to make it hard. Like I said, the verbiage here was really difficult. They have one that it's really simple to understand, and that's the point of the activity. Just be aware of your audience, of what kind of verbiage you're going to talk, because like we said, in your audience, there's people that have great level of expertise, and there's people that are just beginners. So, and that's the end of our presentation. Now, Jose will give us our next topic.
Thank you. If you want to become a rock star when it comes to if you want to become a rock star when it comes to persuading your audience, it would not hurt to start with investigating what kind of emotions sit with them. Having a positive vibe, regardless of whether your audience prefers a playful presenter or a straightforward one when you do not know them well. People are inherently emotional, and a good presenter uses that to their advantage. A great presenter goes in deeper and finds emotional preferences prior to the presentation. Finding out what your audience fears during the presentation will allow you to stay connected well with them and not hurt anyone's egos. For example, if you know someone in the room is introverted and a little shy of talking in public, and you consistently call them out because they're not paying attention, then that might hurt their feelings, and that they might not want to pay attention to you. A better way of handling with this is allow people to get in small groups and discussions so people can rejuvenate their energy and get back on topic with what you're saying. You need to remember to use negative emotions to your advantage. You should have positive tone of voice when you are presenting with people that you do not know, but do not be oblivious to powerful negative emotions, like the audience's fear of failing the class if they do not pay attention. Don't worry, we're not going to tell you this time. When it comes to breaking down a difficult problem, you should have a positive tone when presenting to people. When it comes to breaking down a difficult problem, it is important to find the bright spots, meaning focusing on the positives and avoiding the negatives to make it simpler. For example, when you were in has anyone here taken calculus?
Taken what?
Calculus?
Yes.
Okay, how was your teacher? How did they solve a difficult problem?
Just follow the formula. We just figure out.
A great professor would usually break down the problem step by step, allowing people to view the positives of the equation and allow them to figure it out simply without confusing them too much. When using data-driven appeals, make sure the data you use comes from a reliable source. Your reputation means a lot more than you may know. If you break the trust of your audience with one part of the presentation, what's stopping them from believing you with the rest of the presentation? And this trust can carry throughout the rest of your academic career. So it would not hurt to triple check your work. Once you have all of your data, it is important to put the meaning behind numbers. If you say hypothetically that a company is losing 20% of its stock and is having a layoff, you should rather say a company is losing 20% of its stock and people will be without a home, and some parents will not be able to bring some food back to their family. Having this kind of technique will allow people to see the true impact of your quantified data. It'll give a small story, show emotion, and the impact that comes with your data. You should disregard guessing. There is no reason why you should guess whatsoever. Imagine you are the marketing officer of a big firm. And instead of stressing over what your clients want, just ask them. Working with your audience is one of the most powerful tools that you have at your disposal. By asking them what they want out of your presentation, you can network and get the fear out of presenting to people that you do not know all in one blow. Disregarding being boring, your audience has all day to be bored. So don't give them another reason to hashtag Rough Monday, if you know what I mean, right? Let them know that the presentation was made for them and is just not another grade for you. Do not forget the importance of eye contact. You are not a robot, so give them real attentiveness. Bring passion to the presentation. Even the most boring things stick a lot better when it is explained with enthusiasm. Major misconceptions about persuading the audience is that you do not have to act professional, and the stories are not for grown-ups. When you are dressed professionally, it shows the audience that the topic was important enough not to dress in sweatpants, and therefore they ought to pay attention to what you are saying. Like I said it before, it is not okay to lie, and remember that nothing is worth losing the trust of your peers. Remember that you are here for the audience, not for the wall behind you. So don't read off the slides. Stories are for grown-ups too. They bring to life boring topics and make it someone in the audience that was lost finally click with the information that you are presenting. Anything that helps someone learn something valuable is not a waste of time. If you want your audience to positively absorb your information, remember all of these steps in persuading your audience. I will now pass it on to Dan so he can show you the steps and importance of ecocentrism.
Okay, can anyone tell me what they think when they hear egocentrism? Pride. Now, that stems from the root word of ego, of course, which this word is closely related to that. But it actually means the inability to share your perspective and understand someone else's perspective. It doesn't really mean self-importance or self-esteem, but when it comes to communication, to the study of communications, psychologist Lev Vygotsky says egocentrism is being accustomed to solitary and independent thinking, which means it's hard for you to grasp what everyone else is thinking, and it's hard for you to put yourself in their shoes. By doing your prior research, which they taught you on previous slides, it will help you with putting yourself in their shoes, in their perspective. And of course, it's very important to also explain why you speak. Assumption is a two-way closed street, which means you should not lead the audience to assumptions of why you're doing something or saying something, but in turn, you should not assume the audience already understands or knows why you're saying something. Let them know the purpose of why you're here, and we're here to teach you how to analyze your audience. To relate with your audience, you need to take their perspective. That means you forget about yourself and you put yourself in their shoes. Once you're able to infer why or how your audience thinks based on their behavior and research conducted previously, the easiest follow-up would be to give them information in a manner that reflects with them and aligns with their current beliefs and feelings so they can take it in easier. And at the end of a presentation, you should always give them a takeaway. People should always feel like they left your presentation with something valuable they learned, that they didn't waste their time. Understanding multiple points of view. First and foremost is audience point of view. That's yours. It's awareness of the listener is necessary to deliver a message that is worth listening to. The audience sees you as someone worthy of listening to, so they're going to give you their time and need. for you to deliver your message until, of course, you start mentioning irrelevant information and stories. From their point of view, you are the narrator. You are the presenter, and they expect most of what you're saying to be informational and related to the topic you're presenting. Egocentric speech is the form of speaking that does not necessarily address anyone, and is usually observed in young children that haven't developed yet social skills, and they do not know how to internalize their thoughts yet. Visualizing the audience helps you see their current beliefs and their behavior, and that helps you focus if someone's not really paying attention or they're checking their phone. It focuses you on having more eye contact. In case they're feeling alienated, you can ask them questions to involve them, and generally just pay attention to their demeanor. Now, this is what you should not do. I have my apologies. You do not want to present to a single person, and this is also, again, a behavior that's seen in children and teenagers. Every single time they create a presentation or a writing, they have one person in mind, and that's their teacher. They know what he wants, but that is just one person in the entire audience. I can right now make this presentation on Dr. K, but nobody else has the same knowledge or same needs that he has. And the theory of mind of errors matches the overcoming your fear, and that is also common in teenagers, and that's the unnecessary fear that people are judging you for when there is no evidence of such thing. When you present for yourself, you have to disregard yourself completely, and that means do not think of what you want or your needs when creating an assignment, as you're not presenting for yourself, you're presenting for an audience. Probably the biggest mistake is to prepare with no one in mind, or few people in mind, or especially with yourself in mind. Again, it touches the previous points, as you're not doing this for yourself, you're doing this for other people to teach them a valuable lesson. And common mistakes are to failing to ask questions. You can overlook topics or maybe pass points and people don't understand you, but you don't allow them to ask any questions, or you never address their concerns. You forget to put yourself in their shoes, and at the same time skipping explaining information. This is very important also with topics that are highly informational, like technological seminars and stuff like that. Now I'll pass it on to Zane to wrap it up.
Thank you, Dan. All right, so now you've all learned 5 tactics and understand your ways to analyze and research your audience. Researching your audience, reading your audience, your tone of voice, the words you use, persuading your audience, and of course, understanding your egocentrism. All those play into the 5 tactics to analyze your audience and how you can understand to create your presentations and tailor your presentation to the audience you have before you. Again, your surveys, your quantitative, your qualitative, all those things pre, during, and post presentation can help you analyze the audience that you have at hand.